Kristen and Brian, Vijay, Rich, Mike, thanks for that. And it was fantastic. Up next, we have one of my favorite people in crypto and VC, Rumi Morales, who is a partner at Outlier Ventures. She ran CME Ventures while I was there. She's former Goldman Sachs, founding partner of Chicago Surge, on and on and on and on. One of the most impressive folks in all of the space. And small tidbit, I would not be here if it had not been for Rumi. She is a particular reason for why I got my job at Ripple. But she is going to be moderating a fantastic fireside chat with two folks who need absolutely no introduction, Tim Draper and Greg Kidd. So with that, off to Rumi.
Thank you, Miguel. So nice of you. It's great to see you and so many friends on this Zoom call. As Miguel mentioned, I am a partner and head of venture at Outlier Ventures, and we invest and support a number of protocols in the open data space. And I will say that we are actually having our own conference right now in competition with this one. So the fact that you have got me over here shows just how honored I am to be moderating this panel with two legends, two all-stars, not just in the crypto space. I want to point that out. I recognize this is called Crypto Battle, and we will be talking about crypto. But I think it's always important to have perspective, to have vision. And both Greg Kidd and Tim Draper have proved that year and year again. So I was hoping that we will start obviously with the crypto battle discussion, but that we can pull it back a little bit and talk about how institutions more broadly are starting to think about and access crypto, and then looking at the landscape going ahead. So I will start with you, Tim, if you want to just talk a little bit about some of your recent forays and your view of the crypto landscape right now, and especially what makes today different than perhaps in the DeFi run-up today, different than what we saw a couple of years ago with the ICO run-up.
So DeFi, I think, is step two. I think step one was you get Bitcoin, you get other currencies, they come out and they create this new opportunity. And then the obvious use of that opportunity is to start creating a way that people can lend and borrow in this new, with these new currencies. And that's what DeFi is all about. And I think that the third stage will be when it turns out there are 80% of the money, money put into retail and e-tail comes from women, and only 1 in 14 Bitcoin wallets is a woman's Bitcoin wallet, and I think that big change is going to be part 3. So you're going to start with first. You got these new currencies, and you go, wow, these are better than any of these fiat currencies. Why would you ever want a currency that's tied to government whims, the political forces, whatever? All of a sudden, you've got a currency that's open and global and transparent, keeps perfect records. It's amazing. And so people go, wow, that's fantastic. Okay, now what can I do with it? And that's the beginning of DeFi. And they go, oh, well, yeah, I want to be able to invest it. I don't want to just hold the currency, like a gold hoarder. I want that currency being used. And then people who want to get involved in it, they might borrow that currency. And so you have the lender and the borrower, and you have the opportunity to use that currency. Well, eventually we're going to get to the point where, hey, we're already borrowing, we're already using the currency. We are going to want to spend the currency. And that will be when, I believe, when the women all come on board, get your Bitcoin wallets and start putting them to work. But the thing that excites me the most about this whole new world is that it's global. We were always very tribal until the internet came. We were all very tribal, and we had our borders, and they kept us safe from the other guys coming across the border and all that. And then all of a sudden the internet happened, and we realized that the other guys aren't really a threat. They're actually more a benefit, and we are better off working together with people from other countries and other states and other whatever those tribes were created around became less relevant. Well, all of a sudden there was this new currency, and it was global. And all of a sudden you're starting to wonder, why do we have these borders? And so when you see that, you start realizing that no, we don't actually have to have these borders. We can actually operate without them. Well, that's a huge threat to these people who are in power and want to hold on to it at the expense of their people. And so you're seeing this backlash, but I think that backlash is the rise or the roar of the dying lion. It's like the lion roars and then dies. And then all of a sudden we're global. And I think that's going to happen. I think these countries who are trying to control their borders and control their people and tell everybody no Bitcoin here or whatever, you can only operate here in this country, whatever. I think they're going to die off, and the new world, and I think that new world is 5-6 years away, something like that. All of a sudden we are going to be global. So I think this is the most exciting time in the history of the world. We are actually taking an anthropological step forward. We're going from being a tribal society to a global society. And it all happened because we created these amazing currencies, Bitcoin and all the other currencies that are open and global and aren't tied to some political force. And so I'm very excited about what could happen in the future. We have a company called Unstoppable Domains that is decentralized free speech. So in effect, you can put anything you want. You can get, Rumi.crypto, and you can write anything you want on that, and no one can take it down. And that's the beginning of free speech around the world. And that freedom will spread free markets, free assembly, free whatever. And our world is going to be much, much better off. I mean, think about losing all the freedoms. If I talked to all these guys in South Korea and I said, when you guys start thinking about, maybe we should think about socialism or whatever, I think just look north. That you got a socialist dictatorship there, and that's what you get. Do you really want that? And it's like in Hong Kong, when there was a Chinese Communist Party, the average Hong Kong person made about $36,000 a year, and the average Chinese made about $100 a year. And then the markets opened up, and the Chinese got rich. You need freedom, you need free markets, and you need globalization. And we will all be better off by being globalized. So anyway, it's more than just like, hey, are we into DeFi or what's the next big thing? It is, we are transforming humanity, and this is the greatest time in the history of the world. So any of you guys who are investing, buying tokens, whatever you're doing, keep it up, because this is really an important time.
Yeah, I think most everyone on this conference would totally agree with you, Tim. And I saw Greg smiling earlier. I know you have some Federal Reserve experience, so you may want to have, you have some opinions here too. But Greg, and I should say, Tim, I liked your phrasing up front of kind of the step fashion of first we have just the asset, and then what do you do with the asset? Then how do you spend the asset? And we love the big picture as well. But I also feel, maybe that's just me talking, but just that step from the asset to what do you do with the asset is getting a little bit complicated. There are people that are looking at DeFi, certainly on the institutional side. It's like, what is this about? Are we losing the bigger vision? Are we losing the plot as we think about what's happening in the crypto landscape today? Greg, I didn't know if you have any views of, as you look at crypto at this moment, how you feel about it. If you have any particular dogs in the battle right now that you think are going to win out.
I first want to say I want a ticket on Tim's rocket ship, because I think he's going to get us to the Star Trek future I've always wanted to live in, where there's Cleons and Romulans and everybody can buy dilithium crystals, right? Like they just left out those intermediate scenes where they must have figured out how we got between like the Federal Reserve view and DeFi and Star Trek, and those missing episodes, they must be found or they must be written. And I think Tim is working on those.
It's either going to be Star Trek or Mad Max, which is
Yeah.
what
It's
my
going to be
son
Star
says.
Trek or Mad Max or George Orwell, but I'm hoping it's the Star Trek rendition. And I don't think we're going to get there through socialism or GDPR or whatnot. But look, we live in a time. There was an economist, Hayek, who wrote in 1975 about the denationalization of currencies, and his argument was basically, look, this is that, like, if there's a better form of money out there, just like any better product or service, why shouldn't it win out? Why should, like, national governments have a monopoly on money? And if you're a historian, and you look back in history, that hasn't gone so well. And I'm like from the Federal Reserve, and we're supposed to be like everybody's seen Hamilton, and like a concept of a central bank having like strong discipline on money. And at some point, the Fed has printed trillions of dollars of new money. At some point, there's got to be some number of zeros in terms of how many dollars you print, where people begin to lose confidence. And at least with Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP, there's like a known number. And at some point, debasement of the currency will lead to people, including those housewives or anybody who has like a view about risk, that I better hold some of those things where they can't just add zeros on to the back end. And it would be imprudent to not have those. And to the view of the global vision, in a period when there's all that uncertainty, the thing that these new solutions bring is something that does work across borders. It is more permissionless, and I don't know how you wouldn't consider that to be part of the mix. And all I can say is sometimes things have to get bad enough to get better. And so some combination of when you see the inability of our current social political system to deal with things like COVID, or like the move toward like populism and authoritarianism, when you see the problem of climate change, and then you look to new currencies, whether it's Ripple or Ether or Bitcoin, or even just like the tokenization of something like carbon credits. That's one of the ones I've been looking at lately, is like carbon's a problem all over the world. Instead of having all these little local siloed carbon solutions, why wouldn't you have like a token that looks at carbon and have a global market? And so if you really are concerned that global warming is going to happen and people are going to pay more for carbon offsets, heck, I'd like to hold not gold. I'd like to not just hold Bitcoin, but I'd like to hold some carbon credits as well. And so these new capabilities that really let anybody have a wallet to hold whatever they want, it puts pressure on central governments to like do a better job or move over, because something else is coming. And we don't have to look up at Mr. Chairman of the Federal Reserve or some other currency and say, oh, please, like, do the responsible thing, because that has not worked so well in the last couple of years, the last couple of decades, or the last couple of centuries. And so it's hard to imagine why people wouldn't want to have tucked away in their wallet, just like you used to have like an old little paper traveler's check just packed away for a rainy day. But we're not talking about a rainy day. When you see the vision of things like Libra or Gram, both of which have had like misfires because they've been in the regulatory crosshairs, but people weren't like afraid of Gram and Libra because they weren't going to work. They were afraid of them because they are going to work. And same thing like with digital currency from the Chinese central government, although I'm yet to figure out how are they going to handle that with tourists, with remittances, and with trade, right? So if it's a central bank currency and you don't have like some form of identity, I don't know how it's going to work. So the DeFi people are the ones that are innovating, and they aren't necessarily waiting for permission to innovate. And you get a different kind of innovation when it's permissionless. Now, that doesn't mean I'm promoting not like being compliant with the law, but this is a situation where technology can get ahead of the politicians. And I'm not saying we're not going to have problems, but sitting here and just doing the same old thing and thinking that we're going to come out with a different outcome, COVID, fires, the problems with the breakdown of our political system suggests that Hayek might be right. There might be a currency that reflects somebody else being in charge besides a single company or a single government.
Right. Those are fantastic points. And I'm curious then, Tim, your earlier comments about this being global, and yet we do see some forays by some central banks. China, you mentioned, Greg, with their central bank digital currency. Is this going to be operating? Are we going to be operating together with institutions and the new innovators in the DeFi space? Will the institutions need to go away? Are the central banks, once they come out with central bank digital currencies, able to regain leadership in the development of our financial systems and control of that? I was just curious what your view is, if governments are necessary, if they're going to be leading, if we're going to be side by side, or if they're going to become obsolete.
I'm creating a new category, the D-Gov. We call it D-Gov. No, look, Aurora coin was created in Iceland. Iceland saw that these coins were happening, and they said, hey, okay, we're going to have our own cryptocurrency. It's called Aurora coin. The reason you haven't heard of Aurora coin is it was a huge failure because it's not accepted outside their borders.
Right.
All this, and they're Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, all these things are accepted everywhere. So if I'll give you two interesting examples. If you're in Argentina or Nigeria, you know this, your currency drops 30, 40% every single year like clockwork. And when you hold Argentinian pesos or Nigerian naira or Venezuelan bolivar, they're like hot potatoes. You're trying to quickly move them out and get rid of them because you really want to hold on to the Bitcoin and the dollars. Well, now we're printing so many dollars that you're not going to want to hold on to the dollars either. I mean, the dollar can't hold its value if we've just printed 20% more of them. It's got to be dropping. But what if you're in Syria or Sudan and you've got a bunch of Sudanese money and they push you out of Sudan and now you're a refugee in Greece and you're sitting there and you're going, well, you don't take my Sudanese money. Well, what do? I live in a tent and that's the way it goes. Well, what if you had Bitcoin? You'd go and you just go, I got Bitcoin. I'll pull it down. I'll buy a house in Greece. I'm off to the races. And my life starts again. And that political force that was so nasty to me didn't have the devastating effect on me that it would have if I didn't have a global currency. So I think that it's also, think about that. That's going to do two things. One is it's going to make people freer and more open to the world and travel and decide that they want to go to one place or another and make the governments compete for them. But it's also going to be it makes a government become accountable because, sure, you could be a dictator of an area and maybe you've even got a military force, but if everybody leaves, then who's going to feed you? And you're stuck. You got a bunch of military guys you got to keep fed and you're stuck. They've all left. They've gone somewhere else. And then that economy is thriving because they had a better government. So I think this is great because it forces governments to be like businesses. They have to compete for their customers. They have to be accountable to their customers, and their customers are their constituents. And so, just as everybody's leaving California to go to Texas, you're going to see similar movement in all these different places where if you have good government in one place and bad government in another, the people will leave the bad government and move to the good government. And I think that COVID has put a little bit of a damper on this thing, but it's also accelerated it. It's accelerated people's knowledge of Bitcoin wallets are going through the roof because people are kind of stuck in their house and going, well, what am I going to do? Put on the VR goggles and then try some Bitcoin and, try a few of these things that they've been thinking of trying for a long time. But it's also making us realize how valuable it is to be able to travel, to be able to be open and have an open and free world. That freedom, we're realizing how incredibly valuable that freedom is. Absolutely. And I think that's going to be so in some ways, this COVID is a catalyst to this new world. And so it's incredibly exciting. So
yeah, no, I really agree with that. But I'll ask Greg a question, because you mentioned Libra and Facebook. We've been talking about governments, but I was wondering about your thoughts on like these large technology organizations that are existing because they centralize data, and in a decentralized world, what do you envision their role will be, if any? Will they be getting into more of the decentralized technologies and distributing and sharing their own infrastructure and assets? Or are they also going to become obsolete the way that central banks may?
Well, and again, if you've read the Libra white paper, all 8 pages of it, I mean, you can do a lot of things with decentralized or with blockchain technology, but if your governance is such that like the on-ramps and off-ramps are still controlled by centralized organizations, I mean, it's going to have a somewhat muted effect. I don't think you can ignore Facebook. I don't think you can ignore WeChat. I don't think you can ignore Telegram. Just like in 1995, you couldn't ignore AOL, CompuServe, and Prodigy. Oh man, they were the kick-ass electronic networks. And this thing called the World Wide Web, well, it was pretty wimpy and geeky, and but it was a global protocol. And even though it didn't have as good of a chatbot as the AOL chatbot, the concept of interoperability, that's the killer app. And the fact that it was, that it wasn't a Brazilian internet and a Chinese internet, that interoperability is very, very compelling to a developer community, to end users. And the approach of Facebook and WeChat, it's a little like if you ever saw the movie Demolition Man. There's like the fast food wars in the future, and Taco Bell wins. So all restaurants are Taco Bell. So that Highlander approach where like, one sword to like rule them all, that like Facebook is going to win and everybody else is going to lose and Libra's going to be it. I mean, you can imagine that that's not that exciting for other folks to integrate into. Just like when Facebook went to India and said, hey, we'll bring you, free internet. It'll be Facebook free internet. And, India said, well, gee guys, thanks, but no thanks. So solutions that are inherently brought to us by one industry, one company, one country, and yet they still say like coalition the willing, jump on it. It's really, really hard that any single company, any single country, any single industry is going to figure this out. It's going to have to be a more protocol neutral based solution. And again, that was the key innovation of Bitcoin. It wasn't for any particular industry, any particular company, any particular country. I mean, part of the reason I joined Ripple was like when I went to sign up for the blockchain battle, there wasn't a Bitcoin company to join. I mean, I could invest and put first money into like Coinbase, but like Ripple there was an address and I could go and get a job there. I didn't really care what I did. I just said, I want to learn about this. I hear there's this ledger that you can like do not just the native currency, but it has like, other currencies issued by other backers. I don't know if that's going to work, but like I can't join the Bitcoin company. I can buy Bitcoin. So anyway, you can get involved. And similarly, anyway, not if you're a technologist or whatnot, you should have some of this in your portfolio because, in the Mad Max world, maybe it's bullets that's the currency of the future, but I think it might be Bitcoin, maybe a little bit of gold, a little bit of carbon credits, but like, why wouldn't you have some of digital gold in your wallet?
Ruby, can I interject a little bit here, please? Thank you.
Sure.
So we're getting to that time where we want to allow the audience to have some conversation with you and some Q&A before we end up. Christine, you had your hands up. If you're still there, can you ask your question? If not, I'll read a comment from Santiago. They're addressed to both of you, Greg and Tim. Do you anticipate the VASP rule in conjunction with bank digital asset custody will portend a round of M&A and core competency exchanges by traditional financial institutions? Do you foresee longer range, the whitelisting, auditing of public permissionless blockchains for regulations, taxations? What are the implications of society? And then C, BDC interoperability to VASP. Now, that's
I'll let you take that, Greg.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God.
Oh.
So
I don't know what VASP is, but
I don't know what VASP is. Tim, I was gonna confess that before you, but you beat me to it. What is VASP? I think I know what the issue is, but I don't know what VASD is.
All right, so we're gonna have to leave that for a while then, unless Santiago comes back and can explain that.
I think the point is how is it all going to be regulated? But go ahead, Greg. Why don't you cover that?
Yeah, look, when I joined Ripple, I was like, well, what do you want to do here? I said, well, maybe I'll be like the chief risk and compliance officer. And, like we had a ledger, we had 100,000 plus users, and we had like no idea who the identity was of any of them. And, and they're like, and our week later, we were going to Treasury, and I was going to explain this to Treasury. And I was kind of like, this might not go that well. I'm sure they'll be very polite. There'll be tea and biscuits. But I think the investigation into Ripple, started like, 5 minutes after I left the door. And look, while there were a bunch of smart lawyers from smart law firms that all come up with all the reasons in the world, like why you don't need to be regulated because you did a DeFi kind of type thing, I can tell you, at least in the world that I live in, if like the Federation doesn't like what you're doing, they're going to send a starship and they're going to nuke your universe. They're going to make your life hell. And if there isn't a regulation to make your life hell or a weapon yet to like make your life hell, they're going to invent it and they're going to come and hold you accountable. So I don't see how any of this is going to happen while the guys with like guns and badges are like, sit and looking the other way. They're going to have a say and a seat at the table. And so I think it's naive to think that these things aren't going to have to be compliant at some level. That still doesn't mean that you can't like innovate the hell out of it and kind of like, do a bit of sin and ask for forgiveness afterwards. You might still catch some serious time, but the payoffs are so big, you're gonna see innovation. Tim?
Thank you.
I'll cover this in a slightly different, very similar way, but I'm going to take it a little further. I actually think I'm hoping that in 4 or 5 years, I can raise a fund completely in Bitcoin, invest the entire thing in Bitcoin, have the companies pay their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin, and then have my investors all on a smart contract so that if we have a big winner, it is distributed immediately through Bitcoin the whole way. Now, for that to happen, right now, I tried to do this at one point, tried to invest in a bunch of companies through Bitcoin, and it tripled my accounting bill.
Yeah.
But what if you did the whole thing in Bitcoin or in XRP or in whatever, you did the entire business that way, that they tax you in Bitcoin. Then all of a sudden, all the regulations, everything kind of go your way because they go, oh, we're getting taxes in Bitcoin. And Bitcoin seems to be worth more longer term than the dollar is anyway. So why aren't we just taking this? Once that happens, that will move regulation. And then I feel like another 10 years down the road, we are going to be taxed on the number of days we've been in a given country. Then that will be the taxes that we have. And that can only be handled with cryptocurrency. You can't handle that with fiat currencies. So I think we have an opportunity now to just get the governments on board and just say, hey, look, you can get taxes this way. And if I operate my business, if any of my business is sort of some dollars, some Bitcoin, I can't do this. I'd have to go through triple the accounting bill and I do it that way. But if it's all in Bitcoin or it's all in XRP or it's all in Ether, then I should be able to pay the government in that currency. And I think we have an opportunity to kind of guide the governments in that direction. And then once that happens, the regulations will be like, it'll be much smoother, and people like Facebook won't have, you won't have to watch Mark Zuckerberg sweat under the hot lights and the questions of the 80-year-old congressman.
Thank you, Tim. So I know I don't want to cut this short, but we do have Matthew and his team ready up for the next panel. I do have one final question, and then one final question from the audience and one question from clients of Link2. I'll ask the question from Link2 first is, so are we getting unstoppable domains on our platform to sell to our clients? You don't have to answer that now, Tim, but you
Yeah,
could.
I mean, I think everybody should get a .crypto, and then you can put stuff up there and no one can take it down. I mean, not even unstoppable domains. No one can take it down. So if you've got a message you want the world to see, we get free speech again. You know, we're starting to lose it, but we're going to get it around the world now. So that's very exciting. I think it's a great time for this, because I've noticed a lot of people putting a muzzle on other people if they want to say something, and we're losing that free speech. We can't have the muzzle. We have to have the debate, and then we're all better off. We all benefit from knowing each other's point of view and all that sort of thing.
Rumi, thank you so much for your. Can I ask one DAI one final question? Short answer.
Yes, Tim, big fan. The world needs more people with your enthusiasm. Let me tell you that.
Well, thank you for that. Good. Well,
I was going to ask you a question, but first I want to tell you something. I'm a big Unstoppable Domains fan, and I happen to own YaleFootball.crypto, where Greg went to school.
Oh, my father is jealous. My father was so jealous. He played on the Yale football team.
Really? Well, let him know. Hey, everything's for sale, right?
Absolutely.
Hey, but I've heard you talk about Bitcoin 1,000 times, but I have to ask you, are you an owner in Ripple or XRP or both?
Well, Ripple is XRP is the Ripple currency. Yes, I'm an owner of Ripple or XRP. I'm an owner of Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Tezos. I'm an owner of Aragon. I'm a believer. I think this is, it's happening, it's coming. It's so important for the world, and I want the world to know it, and I want other people in the world to get on board. And if you have any questions or whatever, I'm tim@draper.vc.
Awesome.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Greg. Rumi, do you want to close, or are you?
No, Greg brought me back with CompuServe. I remember my first number email address that I had back then. And it just makes me think of all the great possibilities ahead. If we think of how far we've come since then, how far we've yet to go. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Greg. Thanks, Rumi. This was great.
So, guys.
So just a little quick shout out. So there are a lot of questions still pending. We couldn't get to all of them. What we'd like to be able to do is reach out to you, Rumi, Tim, Greg, and all the other panelists that have been here before. We'd like to do some podcasts with you. If you're open to that, we'll be sending out an email. It would be great to have, and we can accumulate some questions that you can answer for our audience. Is that okay with you guys?
Very good.
Oh, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome.
Send what you need. And if any of the audience want to reach me, tim@draper.vc.
Thank you so much.
Happy to talk to them about whatever they want to talk about.
Excellent. Matthew, so sorry about holding you up on this one. We'll give you a few extra minutes on the back end to make up for it. But we have Miguel introducing you and your panel. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you,
guys.
Carmen.
Take care, guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim, Rumi, Greg. All right, guys. As Karim mentioned, we have